Hello, my speech today will be a short biography of Alexander Vasilievich Chayanov and why his studies are important for developing countries as well as less developed countries. There are two main books I will benefit about Chayanov. One of them is the Theory of Peasant Economy, published by American Economic Association in 1966. And the second book is about proletarian peasants, and it covers the revolution of 1905 in Russian Southwest. It was written by Robert Edelman. Let me first start a short definition of peasant agriculture and how it is differentiated with capitalist agriculture. Chayanov argued for the specificity of peasant production. His view influenced Theodor Shanin and many others. Shanin is defining the peasant highlighted four elements. These are a family farm, land husbandry, a specific traditional culture, and the last one, multi-directional subjection to powerful outsiders. Now, I would like to continue with the short biography of Chayanov. Alexander Vasilievich Chayanov is a name that we are rarely remembering today. Perhaps all developing countries and less developed countries, which are wholly dependent on peasant agriculture, need to know this name. Chayanov devoted all his intelligence and generosity to the service of peasantry. In 1911, he was chosen by the first Congress of All Russian Union of Linen Producers to carry out a survey on the role of flax in peasant incomes in the districts of Volokolamsk, Moscow, Gubernia. Chayanov emphasized the usefulness of the budget analysis of peasant farms, merely of family consumption, as an accounting instrument that would furnish the agricultural officer with information relevant to the organization of the farms for which he was responsible. In the course of the inquiry on flax producers' incomes, which he had conducted in Volokolamsk flax district, together with the inquiry of Smolensk Gubernia, with the assistance of A.N. Grigoriev, made in June and July in 1911. In order to extend the sample to a poorer region, he had discovered the impossibility of applying the accounting methods used in Western Europe at the time. Chayanov pointed out that the marginalist theory explaining the behavior of a capitalist entrepreneur in his choices cannot be transferred to a peasant family unit. For in this type of farm, the decreasing returns of the value of marginal labor do not hinder the peasant's activity so long as the needs of his family are not satisfied. At the Second Congress of Linen Producers in Moscow, Chayanov, who had already made a field survey on the economic stability of flax production in 1911, showed the difficulties involved in organizing a system of cooperation or cooperatives ex nihilo. The peasants would not be interested in cooperatives unless cooperatives offered higher sales prices for their produce. Chainov proposed the organization of the downstream cooperative, that is, a central cooperative for export rather than a network of local producers' cooperatives. In what terms did Chainov in 1917 envisage the solution of agrarian problem? Politically, he believed it was simply a matter of passing legislation that would conform the proposed social ideals. It was necessary to consider the specific characteristic of agriculture. Chainov emphasized that it was diversity of regional characteristics which distinguished the Russian situation. In Central Asia and Southern Russia, there was a nomadic herding and fallow land in Siberia. The land was plentiful and the right of property in it did not exist as such in the central regions. With such diversity, solution of the agrarian problem could not be the same for all regions. Now, this is, I think, a very important point for developing countries, because one-fits-all policies implemented in developing or less developed countries are always unsuccessful. The second distinguishing characteristic of Russian situation, Chainov stated, was the predominance of the peasant farm based on family labor. The peasantry had evolved a great deal at the end of the 19th century. Agriculture has been monetized. Peasants had bought 27 million hectares of land as personal property, often at the cost of great effort. Cooperatives had developed on a commercial basis. Chainov did not think that the old populist slogan, land and liberty, was enough to solve the agrarian problem. The moral obligation was therefore not sufficient because no political power was able to force the peasants to change the nature of his farming. Chainov felt that the solution to agrarian problem lay essentially in the patient work of reorganizing the peasant economy. Chainov did not believe in the virtues of force. It was necessary to find a system, a state regulation that would influence the conditions in which agriculture was to develop rather than to impose certain structures a priori. Chainov defined 4 instruments for this action. The first one, legislation, would first suppress all land transactions without abolishing private property. Only the state would be able to acquire land if anyone wanted to sell it. The second, a fiscal system of discriminatory land taxes would encourage and accelerate transfer of land to the state. The tax would be set for the large capitalist estates at a level higher than the land rents, but at a lower level for the peasant farms. Next, the state could decide to expropriate certain large estates when the national interest required this. The former owners would be compensated by the state bonds redeemable over a period of 50 to 100 years. Finally, the land thus bought or expropriated would form a land reserve to be used to effect the structural reforms required. This reserve land could be rented to peasants to finance the payment of the expropriation indemnities. For Chernov, land reform was not simply a division of wealth among different groups of population, but a recasting of the whole country's economic structure. Chernov devised the difference operating costs as a function of distance. First, constant cost covering seed grain, cost of domestic labor, and the second one, decreasing cost, which is amortization of machinery used in agriculture, and the third one, cost increasing with distance, in other words, with the size of enterprise, covering transportation expenses. He arrived at the conclusion that the limits vary according to type of crop. Chernov had doubts about collective agriculture because incentive problem had been solved more flexibly by the cooperatives based on small family farm with its individuality intact than by the artels. Chernov contradicted with Marx's position with respect to motivation of peasants, while Marx's eyes the chief motivation of peasant economy, the search for maximum income, allowed it to be assimilated into the capitalist system. Chernov claimed that consumption or the family subsistence was the motive force determining the peasants' activity. The dialogue between theoretical discussions and practical research was encouraged by the rapid and, at certain times, dramatic evolution of Russia from 1908 to 1913. A period which offered Chernov an exceptional opportunity for experiment and reflection. He was arrested in 1930 together with a number of his colleagues. His research teams were dispersed, the most fertile and sophisticated group of scholars then working in any country on peasant economy was shattered. Understanding the peasant economic behavior, the economic behavior of peasantry that many developing countries encounter today bear striking similarities to those that were the order of the day in Russia from the emancipation of the serfs in 1861 down to collectivization of agriculture at the end of 1920s. And these countries could be Turkey, could be India, could be Philippines, etc. When we mention about the rural life and peasant agriculture in developing and less developed countries, we recall low literacy rate, low level of development, insufficient infrastructure, and insufficient life quality and risk-averse farmers or peasants agriculture. There are some of issues that Russian economists try to overcome in that period. The first issue they try to solve is that how they can transform traditional rural society as to overcome the misery, squalor, and illiteracy of the peasantry. The second one is that how they can get the peasant to modernize their agriculture. particularly their farming technique, and the last one is that how they can carry out this transformation and modernization so as to permit indeed to facilitate the development of the entire national economy. Let's look at the Russia how acted to handle the peasant problems in those years. One of the first methods used many colleagues, students, doctors, nurses, university teachers quit urban life and attempted to go to the people living in rural areas. They established a life for themselves in the villages. They tried to use the peasantry to get them in motion, to get them mobilized. Russia first made an economic and statistical investigation into peasant economics problems by setting up new provincial and district assemblies, the Zemstvos, in 1870s. According to Chernow, the essential characteristics of business firms and capitalistic enterprises was that they operated with hired workers in order to earn profits. By contrast, peasant family farms, as Chernow defined them, normally employed no hired wage labor, none whatsoever. This means that family farms solely depend on the work of their own family members. Chernow considered this category a real one drawn from life. He contended that 90% or more of farms in Russia in the first quarter of the 20th century had no hired laborers, that they were family farms in full sense of his definition. There are four main factors that play an essential role in the economic theory of the behavior of capitalistic entrepreneurs on the base on classical and neoclassical economics. These are wages of labor, interest on capital, rent for land, and profits for enterprise. All these four factors are strongly interconnected with each other. Chernow considered that one of the missing factors make the theoretical structure get awry. Since the peasant family farms had no hired labor, they paid no wages. Chernow posed this question whether in the absence of the wages, the net gain, the rent, and the interest on capital could be worked out for such peasant farms. Moreover, Chernow saw no validity in circumventing the absence of wage data by imputing values to unpaid family labor. He insisted on taking the entire family household as a single economic unit and treating their annual product minus their outlays as a single return to family activity. What Chernow is differentiated from Marx and Lenin by rejecting both in terms in which Marx analyzed the peasant farm and the assessment by Lenin of the importance of family farms in the Russian economy of his time. My next speech will be analyzing the model theoretically in detail.